Hi, I'm Mads, and I'm doing a presentation on implicit association between political party and intelligence in Wellesley students. So first, we have this figure here shows average response time for Wellesley students when associating Republicans and intelligence and high intelligence, and then Democrats and high intelligence. And here we have a line that would be the same response time for both conditions. As we can see, the average tends to be a little bit below this line, which suggests that students tend to associate Democrats with high intelligence more easily than they do with Republicans and high intelligence. And then here we see average errors for each condition, and the conditions are the same as in the last one. Again, we see a line that would mean that there's the same average errors for both conditions, and our average is a little bit below that, meaning that students make slightly more errors when associating Republicans with high intelligence. Both of these suggest that there tends to be an implicit association between Democrats and high intelligence as compared to Republicans and high intelligence. So this one is referring to participants that take, the question is, do some participants take consistently longer, and do some participants make more errors? And here again we see this is the response time for both conditions, and we can see here that these responses tend to follow this line pretty well, and we have an R of 0.736, which suggests to us that yes, some students tend to take longer, in that it follows a general trend that the longer you take for this condition, the longer you'll take for the other condition. So that tends to show us that, yeah, if someone takes longer in one condition, they will likely just take consistently longer than someone else might. And then again here, this shows average errors with the two major conditions. And here we have an R of 0.596, which is still a fairly strong correlation. So this again suggests that in general, some students tend to make more errors than others. And if a student tends to make more errors with Republicans in intelligence, they will also tend to make more errors with Democrats in intelligence. So the question, were you raised near a big city, was intended to make two approximately equally sized groups. Here we can see that did not happen. This question created two unequally sized groups, and we can see that here this would be like a 50-50 split. Our average was closer to 0.75, and even with this long confidence interval, we can see that it did not do a great job of creating two equally sized groups. Then again, okay, so we have here between the groups, were you raised near a big city? No and yes. We see no definitive difference in implicit association test scores between those who were raised in a big city and those who were not. So there seems to be a slight difference, but it's not large enough to say definitively that there are significant differences. Then there doesn't seem to be an overall trend between average errors and the date of completion. It seems that there's sort of some random variation, but it doesn't seem to follow a general trend, and it's very close to having no what's the word? Sorry. in general, there doesn't really seem to be a big correlation between completion date and average errors. That's the end of the slideshow. In terms of future directions that we should potentially take to further this research, I think it would be much more informational to do this type of research in the general population, perhaps selecting by random registered voters in a district that's very rural, and then in a district that's very urban. I think that would be a lot more telling, and then you could also have two equally sized groups, things like that. So yeah, I think in general, this research was sort of inherently biased just because of the groups that we had, and also the fact that we created a question that did not create equally sized groups, that had very different sized groups. And so if we went in that future direction, I think that data would be a lot more telling.